Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. We're absolutely delighted to have Lisette here. I think you might even be able to see Lisette right now. Cup of coffee ready. We're just waiting for the last couple of participants to log on. We're nearly there. And we'll be working this afternoon on sonatas and a flute partita by J.S. Bach. Lisette's got huge amounts of wonderful information prepared to share with you. And we've got three wonderful students from across Europe. So we will be recording the session, and do feel free to ask any questions you like during the chat. I shall make a note of them, and Lisette will answer them. I'll help if I can. During the session and at the end of the session. And I might, during the session, put up a couple of links as well, of ways you can subscribe to more news about what we're up to, find our recordings. Lisette's prepared some beautiful solo recordings, which are all on our YouTube channel. So I'll put some links in the chat to those as we go. But for now, it just gives me huge pleasure on a dull London Saturday afternoon to brighten it up and introduce Lisete da Silva Bull. Thank you, Lisette.
Thank you, Tati. Well, it gives me great pleasure to be here, and from London to a grey day in Kent in the countryside. I welcome you all, and I'm just so thrilled so many of you are here and have taken an interest in the work that we're doing. I mean, this all started as a project funded by the Arts Council of Great Britain to be a help and to keep the work that we're doing through a pandemic. I mean, we're still in lockdown. There is hope, but we've built such a wonderful community of musicians across the globe. And it's been such a pleasure, hasn't it, Tati, to do this, because it's been really our aim, and I really believe, and I know we in the band really believe in accessible learning and education, and to create a space that is free, that's friendly, that's safe, that without judgment, to welcome players, to welcome people who love music, who are interested just like we are. A place where we can have a discussion about the music we all love, and share an interest in. It's a fantastic thing to be able to do, and it's been a great positive to come out of such difficult time. And again today, I mean, we are in really good company. I mean, I think you're never in bad company with J.S. Bach. And I'm delighted to be able to do this. I think, again, today, hopefully we'll start a discussion about, or continue a discussion that has been had for a long time, because these pieces, there's a lot of mystery surrounding some of them, and perhaps I will give you some information that some of you may know, and some of you may be news to some, but certainly interesting things from our point of view, and from research point of view. Today we're going to be listening to the Sarabande of the Flute Partita in A minor, played by Anna Dunne on recorder, so transposed to C minor, followed by Gemma Winfield, who's playing two movements of the Sonata in E major transposed to F major. So this is the BWV 1035, and finishing with the wonderful Konrad from Austria, who's playing the first movement of the G minor, BWV 1020. You know, and we'll see what else we find about all these lovely pieces. I will have no definite answers. I will have perhaps more questions raised, and what could be a really, really interesting conversation about all of these. I will do my very best to answer your questions in what I know, and I will also be referring to some wonderful pieces of research on the subject, and if you are interested, Tati has all the details and she can give you all the books and research that I'm drawing my own research on for today. So if I would kick off a little talk about these pieces. I mean, I think anyone who knows these pieces know that there's a shroud of mystery about provenance and authorship about these sonatas. In essence, there are 7 sonatas for flute and a solo partita. Some of them we know to be Bach's, some of them attributed. And I'll go in some. I mean, the only surviving sonata, by the way, that we know that has Bach's autograph is the B minor. Okay, the E minor has got different 6 sources, 6 manuscripts, all of them. The G minor is a big question mark that we'll come to later. The A major 1032 is incomplete. You know, and I could go on and on and on. I think out of the 3 that are playing today, the E major that's been transposed into F major is, out of the 3, the ones that we pretty much sure it is Bach's. I believe the Partita is Bach's, but you know, some people may, you know, think that's perhaps not for the flute, that perhaps is for the violin. And hopefully throughout the masterclass there will be a little bit of information that may help to create more questions or to clarify some that you may have. Now, it is thought that one of Bach's favourite instruments for chamber music was the flute. But it is quite difficult to know exactly just how much he wrote for the instrument, or what their origins may be of those that do survive. There are many questions over the authenticity of some of Bach's 7 flute sonatas and the real instrumentation for the solo partita. The sonatas that are attributed either come with an autograph or have been extensively researched and found to have the clear language of J.S. Bach. I know for sure that I would have not had the courage or the knowledge. You would really have to be very knowledgeable and know the output, the phases, the compositional phases and development of Bach's language as well to do that. And I think most people find that quite scary. I think there's something scary about Bach, and hopefully today we'll demystify a little bit more that perhaps it shouldn't be such serious and austere music that some may attribute to it. It is believed that 3 sonatas, G minor, E flat major and C major, are not by Bach. Right, I just saw a message.
Don't worry, I've got it.
Brilliant, fantastic.
Yeah. An attendee's just asked exactly for lists of what we're playing, so I'm putting up. We don't. I should just say, Raoul, we don't have the music to put up at the moment, but I've sent a list of what the pieces are.
Brilliant. Okay, lovely. Thank you, Tati.
Pleasure.
So the G, it is thought that both the G minor and E flat major may be by the same composer, possibly C.P. Bach, on account of its musical language, but this is contentious and there are opposing views. Both the E flat major and the C major sonatas appear to have been performed in Leipzig, and I will come to that later. Again, the only surviving sonata in a manuscript by Bach himself is the B minor sonata, and I do have a copy here, and even in here there are different versions. This is a wonderful Spares edition of the Bach B minor sonata, which is such a wonderful, wonderful piece of music. Many of Bach's works survive through the works of particular copyists, and this is where some areas of authorship and where pieces are really originating, and if they indeed really by Bach can come into some issues. So work of copyists such as Peter Kellner, who lived between 1705 and 1722, these are preserved in Berlin. But for instance, the E minor sonata has differences from more recent finds. I believe there's 6 different manuscripts, and the differences are such as missing bars and no figures in the bass part, I believe in the first movement. He may have even altered some of the musical writing to suit being played on the keyboard. Other more reliable sources will be in Leipzig, which stem from the personal belongings of Wilhelm Friedmann Bach, and so on. Due to the sheer amount of works Bach composed, the amount of manuscript copies, some autographed and some attributed, some with conflicting music information, it is hard in some cases to place the piece when it would have been written, or if at all written, by Bach. And I've done my best to put together information that will help understanding the pieces played in this masterclass. Over Bach's lifetime, there was immense development in both musical style and instrument designs. And I've made some interesting finds for myself. I've looked into the work of some wonderful researchers and wonderful academic work to help me in this. Now, Italian style from Vivaldi through his student Pisendel, French influence, especially at the court of Dresden, and so on, meant that Bach would have immersed himself in different styles, known different players and instruments. And at a time when music is developing at such fast pace and instrumental design, it isn't straightforward to place exactly the players or instruments themselves, because I'm quite sure they would have changed during the lifetime of Bach's life. And that's a really interesting thing to think about. Bach was a bit of a magpie, and he absorbed lots of national styles. Even though he never left Germany or the Germanic states that make modern day Germany. And as is evident from his direct arrangement of Vivaldi's A minor Concerto Grosso as into an organ piece, he was a great fan of Vivaldi. And unless you know this, you wouldn't have necessarily have known that. And if you think of the French influence orchestral suites, with their sweeping French overtures and dance movements. I mean, his music has its own character, and I would go as far as say, yes, he is a Baroque composer, Germanic composer. But I think it is really important to think of individual composers having their own individual style as well, and to look into their wider output and work and life development to form a real sense of what they were about. Over the course of his life, there was an enormous variety of instruments and development. He would no doubt have heard, and when it comes to flutes, he would have known three-part instruments such as haka, even hot tear actually, into early four-part instruments and later four-part instruments, and I'll come to that in a little while. He would know instruments, if they're three-part instruments with very smaller blowhole and very sweet, gentle sound, to the more dynamic sounds of later instruments. And if you think that the bore sound and blowhole sound directly affect volume, response and speed and intonation as well, you start getting a sense that perhaps there's no such thing as a Bach flute. There will be lots of different possibilities. Now, I found there's this wonderful article by Ardal Powell and David Lazocki. I mean, if you're a flute player, if you're interested in early research, you will no doubt have heard these names. I mean, these are giants of the flute, early flute world, and whose work I admire immensely. And there is a really wonderful article called Bach and the Flute, the Players, the Instruments and the Music, that I urge you, if you are so inclined, we'll put up the links to have a really good read. It's fantastic. And as part of the article, I'll read directly. Leipzig, rather than Dresden, and this I thought was really, really interesting, was the home of Saxon wind instrument making at this period. And during Bach's tenure, Leipzig makers Eichentopf, Sattler, Perschmann, Groen and Bauermann all made flutes that survived to the present. Other Leipzig makers active during the period, but not represented by surviving flutes, are Bauermann, J.R. and J.G. Perschmann, Noack, Ebicht, Otto, Haupt, Graal, Wolf, Hartwig and Grenzer. I have some examples, three instruments that, were around Bach's time, so you can have a look if there is time. Now, what is really interesting is that this may be an extraordinary number of woodwind makers for a town of only, talking about Leipzig, and this is the time, I think the Partita is written, still part of his Curtain time, 1722-23. He then takes position in Leipzig from 23 to 1750 to his death. So most of the music or in fact all of the music apart from the partita is from that period. And this is why I'm concentrating talking about Leipzig in particular. So this may seem an extraordinary number of woodwind makers for a town of only 21,000 inhabitants. And this is partly explained by the fact that instrument making in Leipzig was at no time regulated by a guild. And I think this is incredible. So rather than you being in a strict time regulated by, you know, very strong regulations, because other guilds were incredibly regulated. Look at Italy, look at all other countries where you had the woodmakers, you had the turners, you had the wood making, you had the key makers, and they're all heavily regulated, and things had to follow a certain order. Here it seems that it's a free-for-all. It's a much freer environment, which means no doubt that you'll have instruments of great quality, and others of not so great quality. Now, pitch, let's talk a little bit about pitch, because before we start, I'd like to very quickly talk about pitch and about the players as well. And if I don't have time, I will do it as we go on. Yes, Tati, sorry.
Perhaps we could just do pitch and then play and then break before the next session, go into the players, because I've got the horrible job this afternoon of keeping an eye on the time. I hate that because there's never enough time. How can one?
I have a lot of information, which is brilliant. I'd rather, you know, that we have less time. So the low chamber pitch, introduced by Konrad. Konrad was Bach's predecessor in Leipzig, is in 1702. Was between 388 and 400 as the standard for performance is in a Thomas Kirke, and it was but was probably not in general use after 1720. So we're talking very quite low pitch. Now this is, I think, quite interesting. There is some evidence of a desire to establish 410 as a German standard pitch, and that exists. There's some evidence through the flute sizes, so the middle sizes, about the flute sizes, that surviving flutes can be associated with the Bach's Leipzig period. So from about 1715 there was an attempt to standardize the pitch, and Sattler and the St. Petersburg Persian F flute seem to belong to the period when the higher chamber pitch was in use. This is not the same as the rest of Europe, where many corps de rechange were used continuously. And in fact, we also know that Quantz was not a fan of the higher pitch and he resisted it. And I think from here, I mean, I've got information of where they may have been performed as well and who the players are, but I am very aware of time. Now, if we go into the Bach Partita, and Anna, this is now, take a nice deep breath. I know it's scary to play, but this, I can promise you, this is a really friendly, we all friends, and actually we are friends.
I should just chip in. I'm getting wonderfully supportive comments from our attendees who are loving all this information. Can't wait to hear the music. So I will make sure that a full list of reading materials is put up and any references. And if I forget something, you can always email us or contact us afterwards. I will do my best to answer, and Lisette, of course, is very happy to always answer. So don't worry if we don't come to a specific question today.
Well, I've put together things, but I'm very curious. Yes, I do have an academic mind. I'm a bit of a musicologist and a performer, both. I don't, you know, sometimes one hat is more than the other, but I am very curious. And as a player, I always want to know who these people were, what was happening, you know, so I try and put material, and it gives me a great joy to do it.
I think it's so important to put the music in its social and historic context. Actually, that's what started to bring music alive for me. I mean, we play historical instruments, but for me, it's a no-brainer. You should know about the times and the people who lived through it and played the music.
Absolutely.
I'd love to try and find out who played these pieces.
Yeah. I mean, it won't make you play better. You still have to practice and, for goodness sake, enjoy the music.
It helps you time travel, doesn't it? It's all about time traveling and as much information as you can gather.
And being curious about things. Now, when we come to the Bach A minor partita, perhaps written in a curtain period, And this partita was virtually unknown until 1917, when the manuscript, and I've got the manuscript found in the Royal Library in Berlin, the manuscript MS Bach PG 68, if you want to know. For this reason, it was not included in the my German is terrible, Gesamthausgabe der Bachschaft, which was finished in 1900, which is a sort of put together of all Bach's work. The partita is a late addition to Bach's body of work. There isn't an autographed manuscript, meaning that quite questions about concerning its authenticity. There are good reasons to assume the work is Bach's own, because the manuscript copy is written on folios of a collective manuscript which contains a complete and careful copy of the sonatas and partitas for the violin. Although the heading is heavily cut, it seems to read Solo pour la flûte traversière par J.S. Bach. And in fact, this is on IMSLP, and you can see it. I've got it here. You really can see it. Some think the partita was really meant for the violin because of its writing. Now, something that's really interesting to consider is that there was such a thing, and I'm going to use a term called violinization of flute music across Europe, certainly in France, certainly in Paris. And Bach would have known about this trend, no doubt. And there is a sense that perhaps because of where this piece was found, it was actually for the flute, but really inspired by the violin playing all the arpeggiatos and all of that language that was being introduced. I have to say that, for instance, in Paris, Corrette in 1739-40, his treatise, he does give tips on how to violinize flute music of the time, how to arpeggiate. So this is a known thing, and I'm not sure a lot of people are aware of this, and I find this fascinating because so much moves in fashions. So perhaps a stylistic analysis may regard this piece as an experiment in exploring possibilities of the leading instruments of his time, from which he wrote solo works: the keyboard, violin, cello, and flute. And this would tie in very much with the piece being part of the Cotton manuscript. Now, some say that each movement of the partita mentions or nods to 4 different styles: the Allemande German, the Italian corrente, and the French sarabande, of which we're going to listen to some today, and the English bourrée angloise. But I think it's quite nice. I quite like an European nod to different styles. Thank you, Bach, if that's indeed true. If that's indeed true. Now, I always like... Yes, Tati?
Very, very quick question before we get too deep into me losing the chat. Quick question from an attendee. From which source did you get the information about the tip for the violinization?
Oh, that comes from various sources,
Okay.
including Ardell Powell and Lisocki.
Right.
That
you.
really mentions it, and is really important. I would really hasten anyone who is interested in woodwind playing to really look at the work of Lisocki and Ardell Powell. I'm a great fan. I've got, I think, probably most of his works in my own library. As a researcher myself, I find them to be really thorough. It's fantastic pieces of work. I always like to talk about meanings. There's never enough time to talk about temperament and symbolism and all of the other things. And I know we do want to get to playing. I always give a little snippet of Matheson or somebody close to Bach who would have attributed meanings to the piece. This is in 1713, so not so close, but close enough to the A minor partita. So they're saying that A minor is somewhat plaintive, honourable, and calm. It invites sleep, but it is not on this account unpleasant. Moreover, it is highly suitable for keyboard and instrumental music, well, just as well. Isn't it, Anna? As we prepare to play the Sarabande. And I'd like you to play it, and I will talk a little bit about it. So if you're ready, we would love to hear your beautiful Yes, yes, she does. Betty Mather. Yes, she does. She does have some wonderful work, and I've got her work here as well. Absolutely, indeed. And I will talk about her in French masterclass. By the way, she's amazing.
So you want me to play now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Without further ado,
introduce my partner, which is a maple Takayama, and it's a 415 pitch because I too like the lower pitches. So let's see how we do.
thank you, Anna. That was beautiful. Well done. You can breathe now. Sigh of relief.
I know, I forget to breathe through the entirety, actually.
I think who wouldn't? Who? Thank you so much. That was really, really beautiful. I think it is such a special piece, and I think I don't know if you can see it in my own music room. I've got a very stylized version of the Bach Partita in my wall. I've got Bach and Rameau side by side on my wall. I do adore this piece of music, and it's a really interesting piece because for those who know what a sarabande should sound, it is nothing like a sarabande. Yes, Tati. I can't hear you. Sorry.
Classic. I always forget to unmute. Yeah. This piece dates from his Curtin period, as you explained. He was there till 1723, and I just find this absolutely fascinating because he was free at this time. It was the only time in his life he was free to compose for the instruments and the forces he wanted to. Sorry, this has nothing to do with the form of the Sarabande. I'll come to that. But I do love that, because he wasn't constrained by church or state at that point. This is where we have the Brandenburgs, the orchestral suites, all this wonderful music for flute, you know, the second orchestral suite with the flute part. But we have the cello suites from this period. And this brings me to the Sarabande, because this particular Sarabande is so untypical, atypical of a Bach Sarabande. For me as a cellist, it's all about the second beat, actually, throwing the weight onto the second beat. And we have chords and all sorts to help us with that, which obviously you don't have here. But it wouldn't strike me as being a Bach Sarabande on first listening. It's fascinating, isn't it?
And I wonder what's behind it. But for those who don't know, a sarabande by this time is a slow, sensuous dance movement originating at this, in this particular form from France. I think it began as something else, and it was quite fast. And you've got some wonderful examples here in the UK, for instance. From Gibbons and others of really fast and sprightly sarabandes. By this time, they'd become very slow and gentle and incredibly expressive. And the slowness, it is thought, is to allow the expression of the dancers who were doing more and more virtuosic steps to it. And a sarabande typically is a movement in three that has not an accent, but it's got a nod to the second movement. And if I may, Tati, see if you recognize. Which is, of course, the sarabande from the second cello.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful hearing the implication, or actually the chord there, how you deal with the chord. My brother-in-law plays bass trombone, and I've loved hearing him interpret these pieces too. I mean, let's face it, Bach works on any instrument. We can find a solution to these problems. But yes,
it's really. I did play a wrong note, by the way, for this.
I wasn't going to say.
Up in there at some point. So basically, it's a movement in three. Tam, ti, dum. Tam, ta, dum. For those who want to think of something like Folia, rhythm, tam, tam, ti, dum, tam, for instance, where you've got typically a dotted rhythm on a second beat, so it lightens the first beat into the second beat. Well, this doesn't do that at all. And so on and so forth. What it appears to do, it works in a 4-bar structure. For those who are studying, who know it, who have, or indeed the music in front of them, I've got a copy of manuscript here. Oh, and by the way, there's another issue with the manuscript is talking about, nerdy things, that apparently there was an issue with the copyist because this piece is in 2 different copyists' hands. The Allemande is in one, and it was left for another copyist. So this is why there are issues with that as well. Okay.
It's never simple with Bach, is it?
It really is. I mean, he wrote so much music. And unless it's autographed by him, how are we going to know? You really have to dedicate a lifetime, and some people have, or an entire group of people, because the output is so big. In a lifetime, apparently, you wouldn't be able to copy it out. Just one person.
And he wasn't writing necessarily with a view to posterity.
No.
That's an interesting thing for us to consider in the 21st century, how 18th century, how our beloved composers, Bach, Handel, for example, how they hoped they might be remembered. It wasn't perhaps in the way that musicians, composers today, we have an expectation, because things are laid down electronically, they will be there. But we know it's thanks to Mendelssohn, really, that Bach is rediscovered in the first place. Yes. Anyway, so back to the music, Lisa.
No, but it is really interesting. So what you do have, it's a form that is different. I think perhaps the idea of it is of a sarabande in spirit, but perhaps not in the form as we would know of a dance. These pieces are not meant to be danced, by the way. The cello suites were not meant to be danced. The orchestral suites are not meant to be danced. These pieces are inspired by this very famous, very popular, fashionable dance movements that people would have known. Now, what does happen in the opening section, you've got this really, really special opening few bars, which are just exquisite. And rather than having 1, 2, 3, you get 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. So you've got the sense of 1 and a bar over the 4 bars. But it's a very different thing. It's a very different pulse. It's a very different heartbeat. And the thing to do, perhaps, is to just have a look at how we could phrase, for instance, the first opening few bars. And if we just listen to the intervals as well. So really, what is he doing? He's going from the C or the A and there's a sense that I want to forget about bar lines, and that everything, and I will, every time you hear me teach, you'll hear me talk about forget bar lines and listen instead to the harmonic rhythm, and to, because that's really the heartbeat and pulse of a piece of music. And it's just so interesting and so incredibly, I think, profound and beautiful, both in the flute and on the recorder version. The first note of the second bar are weak notes. They are, well, I don't want to call them weak, they are gentler notes, they are closer notes, they are darker notes, either the A flat on the recorder or the F natural on the flute. And I think that is quite something. I'm not sure Bach would have intended that for sure, because I don't think he particularly, and I'm going to, perhaps what I'm about to say is a bit contentious, but he didn't really pay so much attention on what was hard, but rather to what he wanted out of the music. So there are accounts of a few fights of instrumentalists and perhaps singers with which he, you know, didn't agree with the level of difficulty. And we know that Bach was quite stickler for how things were performed, and it demanded greatness from their performers. And I must say that none of the repertoire for flute is easy, and it demands quite a lot from the players, and from that, for that I'm really grateful, because good music stretches you and makes you a better musician, and it is very much in the struggle that you find your strength. And I think this is really, really true for a lot of things. And so I would find that speed is also directly impacted. So if we're not dancing it, if it's not your strict sarabande rhythm, if in fact is it a sarabande, then we need to think and to listen clearly about to the lines and to where our breaths are going to be, because he's kind of kind with this one, and the Allemand not so much, because it's just forever we have to find patterns and places where it's appropriate to breathe with the harmonic rhythm and with the patterns that fits with this. He's got clear 4-bar line, which Anna did really, really beautifully, and I would like to explore a little bit of the colour of the first few bars, especially what do you do with that second note? It's almost like a blue note, isn't it? So you've got this sort of leaf falling, tum, tum, dee da 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 da, this ascending line that then rests da da dee da dum over a question mark, because obviously it's not a perfect cadence, is it? It finishes on a dominant. Anna, would you like to play that again?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I have to confess that I chose this recorder because it's particularly good on its A flat.
Thank you. How lovely. Good. It's behaving nicely.
If I was playing the Allemand, I'd probably do it on the Dunne, because the upper register is better. But this one has a really lovely low.
Well, that brings us to what it demands of the instruments. You know, if you think of the Bach partita, you know, how high, what the range is of the Allemande, for instance, top A, of the instruments he may have had at the time. Oh, right, so nobody can see Anna.
Yes, Anna, you weren't picked up just then. I think you might need to speak a little closer to the microphone. Okay, but maybe try but let's see if we can hear you again when you play, because we could see you before when you played.
Okay.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you, Anna. That is really, really lovely. And I would take a little bit longer on that A flat, you know, and consider doing a little decrescendo to shape the note, to connect it to the G, and then a little crescendo. Because you've got this. And then a little bit, and then if you carry on playing, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Anna. Lovely, thank you, Anna. I don't know if you're aware how the harmony changes and shapes the feel of it, because you finish in the relative major for the recorder, the E flat major, and for the flute, the C major. There is a bar that we need to clarify, and for those who know this party to know, is a bar that nobody quite knows. I mean, the version that's handed down from the manuscript on bar 10 has got the rhythm as, but some people think that was a mistake, and it should be the same as all the other patterns that appear. I'm not so sure, because I really don't know. I could think, well, yes, it does make a difference. Some people play it. Because on bar 12, and so on and so forth. But who knows? Who knows? I will stick with the manuscript until I know more or better.
I stuck with what I knew. I thought if I go to the manuscript, because my music isn't that.
I know.
I'll just make it. I'll end up in a pile of.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine.
But in his other sonatas, he does change the rhythms, doesn't he? So 1034, that there are two very deliberate, same sort of phrase, but slightly different. So
that's it. You need to know his music, and this is the thing. You really do. With these questions, we know that copyists make mistakes all the time. You also know that editors, particularly in an earlier time, in the 19th century, for instance, did change things and modify things or improved things. Not particularly with Bach, but with other composers. We know, I've come across it, which is, you know, and some that have also been rumbled for it, which I've also come across commentaries of that, which I think is excellent. Okay, so I think, Anna, that's really, really lovely. I think the pace is lovely. I know some people like playing it fast. I feel personally that the heartbeat it's slow and gentle. There's a lot of detail in it. The trick here, it's because it's we are blowing, is making sure we've got enough breath, that we are wise about how we use our lungs, and also what we do with the phrasing. in terms of dynamic, in terms of articulation, what best brings out the phrase and indeed the changes of character within it. There's so much going on, and I think it's such a hopeful ending of the first section, isn't it? What amazing intervals. Wow. And there's a real volte-face, there's a real change of character. And I would say for those who are playing semi-quavers to be very careful not to change the rhythm. That perhaps there are other ways of playing with the beat. And, you know, those who've known me from other masterclasses have heard me speak. I like talking about jazz and about playing on top of the beat, on the back of the beat, and there's different ways in which you can arrange the beat and indeed the drive through the phrase to get there. And I do want to play a little bit, we're running out of time, I know, just a little bit of the second half. That'd be marvellous, thank you. Thank you, Anna. That's really, really lovely. I'm trying to, that somebody asked me a question, when is it appropriate to use terraced dynamics? And I don't know what terrace, I'm not English, so English is not my first language. And I'm trying to...
Well, that was an anonymous question. Perhaps you could clarify it, expand on your question, and we'll come to it later, because I know that's a subject that will come up throughout the masterclass. But so do clarify that for Lisette.
Yeah, what I would say that the use of dynamics is quite an individual thing. I think it comes from a place of knowledge. I think it comes from a place of understanding the harmony and the phrasal structure. And I think when it comes to phrasal structure, and we're talking about sort of narrative language, and we're talking about rhetoric and rhetorical language and meaning. And that also, aside from the obvious, which is to actually know the names and attribute parts of the piece, which, by the way, don't always work. It's good to know about it, and that was a thing, but that dynamic use is very, very much born out of quite a few things. And I would say that if the phrase is ascending, if the phrase is changing key to a major key, for instance, perhaps it is appropriate to do a crescendo. Similarly, you can do a diminuendo if you're going down, but again, other times it will be appropriate to do a crescendo. Everything is contextual. I will find out what terraced.
I can look into that as well. Just keeping an eye on the time as well, because there's never enough time. Because I think sadly we've reached the end of our time allowed for you, Anna. It was absolutely fantastic, and
thank you. Really lovely playing. That was brilliant.
And now we should introduce Gemma, which would be Gemma. You'll need to unmute. Thank you.
Brilliant. Hi, Gemma. So lovely to have you here with us. Okay, so what I'd like to do a little bit is just very quickly talk about a couple of things we haven't had yet time, and I'll come into yours because yours is a lot less complicated when it comes to background and things like that. So I'm not going to talk about as much for the A minor partita. Okay, so what after pitch, I wanted to talk about for whom were these sonatas, and this will fit into yours very nicely. There's a wonderful article by Jane Ambrose, and which is called the Bach Flute Sonatas, Recent Research and a Performer's Observation, and it's by Jane Ambrose, and it is published by the Bach Institute. It's 1980. Yes, absolutely, it does indeed. And this is straight from her research about the players who would have been around Bach's time. So I'll read very quickly. So Berlin flautist Michael Gabriel von Friedershof, Gabriel Beaufordin. Now Beaufordin would be a masterclass on its own because there's a lot of development in his research in making his instrument. Beaufordin was a great French virtuoso who taught Quantz and J.S. Bach's brother, Johann Jakob, Johann Heinrich Freytag and Johann Gottlieb Wodig were employed as Kammermusiker in Köthen. So that applies perhaps to that he had all these wonderful players around. Now on May 8th, 1727, when he was already in Leipzig, Bach issued a testimonial for Frederick Gottlieb Wild. And at first I wrote it as Wild, but it's with my German is dreadful, I apologize, who had been a flautist in Leipzig since 1724. He may have been the inspirations for the series of cantata obbligati in 1724, BWV 173, 94, 78, 8 and 114 are especially difficult. I know there's some questions about whether they would be suiting the recorder. There's all kinds of myriad of questions, this is not the place for it now, but it's a very interesting subject. Two other players appear on Charles Terry's chart of Leipzig musicians. They are Johann Friedrich Kirchhoff, Johann Christian Oschatz, and Johann Gottfried Bernhard Bach, Bach's third son. Is the only known member of his immediate family to have played the flute. Quantz and Frederick the Great are associated with Bach's music in peripheral ways. And Wolf says, this is Christopher Wolf, and I really cannot recommend this book enough. Learned Musician. There's some wonderful information. Very, very good book indeed. Says that Quantz most likely played the first flute part of the Kyrie and Gloria of the B minor Mass in 1733. I think that's really interesting. And further reading, there's a wonderful list of players that Bach met and possibly have met in the Powell Lasocki article I have mentioned. Where would have these pieces been performed? Hard to know for sure, but private concerts and even some public performances. Now, this I think is an interesting thing. One source of information is the listings of the weekly concert series in Leipzig, curated by Bach and played by his Collegium Musicum. Collegium Musicum was a group of musicians that came together to play chamber music and other works, and held a weekly series of concerts in Leipzig.
That's right, and they were often at Zimmermann's Cafe House, actually.
Yes, exactly. And for those I've been, Tati, I know you've been, and I've done the whole Bach pilgrimage. I've been to Bach House, I've been to Weimar, I stayed in Thuringia. I did the whole tour, and I stayed in Erfurt with dear friends I visited. It was very exciting. And having coffee at Cafe Zimmermann was something, you know. I imagined the coffee cantata there, quite frankly. I thought it was very exciting.
Well, there's that wonderful museum at the top of the coffee house, actually, with the coffee cantata being broadcast. No, it's a fantastic city if you don't know it, Leipzig.
Good coffee. I'm Portuguese and I really do like my coffee. Good coffee. I had really excellent coffee at Leipzig. Thank you. Now then, he says that some of the sonatas, flute sonatas, and I think this is exciting to know, would have been performed as part of Leipzig's weekly concert series. And and his work as director of Collegium Musicum. This is Bach. Wolf says, this is not to say that all works for which only Leipzig material exists were specifically written for the Collegium. Some may be of pre-Leipzig origin, other may have been written for different purpose, and still others may result of commissions, and this is where it comes to you, Gemma, by the likes of Berlin flutist Michael Gabriel von Fredersdorf, Chamberlain to the King Frederick II of Prussia, Frederick the Great, whose name can be connected with the Flute Sonata BWV 1035 and Bach's trip to Berlin in 1741 and also 47 he went, and of which the musical offering is then a direct result. And there's, you know, another story there to be told. In the list of the instrumental music for the Ordinaren Concerten, some flute sonatas do appear to have been performed as part of the concert series. And I do have the list, and I can tell you that on Wolf's book, if you have it, it's on page 357. By the way, if you want to sneak, because it's really interesting, I find this so exciting. So basically, BWV 1034, E minor was performed perhaps in 1724. BWV 1033, now this is really interesting, the C major was performed in 1731. It doesn't say it was by Bach, it's given a BWV number, but how interesting that one of the pieces, actually two, that are not attributed to him, even though C.P. Bach did say that Bach wrote the C major, but it's a bit murky, actually was performed in Bach's life during his tenureship there. The E major was perhaps performed in 1741. And the E flat major, which is the 1031, is on the list, but there's no performance date. So there is an account of two of the so-called attributed sonatas being known and played under Bach time that he would have known about. So I think that's really, really interesting. Now with E major, this piece results from commission by the likes of Berlin flautist Michael Gabriel von Fredersdorf. And, you know, I have to say for flute players, particularly traverso players, E major is quite a key. Don't you agree? I think it is. And I've been playing it for many, many years and performed it really a lot. Now, in 1713, Matheson says of E major, I think this is a bit removed from the date of publishing of the piece being written, but I think it's really it's funny. It's a really funny explanation for the key. Its fashions would have changed by then, but I don't have any records of key meanings of the time of 1741. So E major, okay, Gemma, are you ready for this? This is quite something. So E major expresses a desperate and wholly fatal madness incomparably well. How about that? It is most suited for the extremes of helpless and hopeless love, and under certain circumstances it is so biting, severing, sorrowful, and penetrating that it can be compared with nothing but the fatal separation of body and soul. Blimey!
That's quite something to live up to when you incorporate that into your planning for performing.
But the thing is, if you know the E major, it's such a joyful piece, isn't it, Gemma? Yes. It's so bright and fun and just gorgeous. It's a delightful piece of music, incredibly rhetorical, very the storytelling there is just so much fun. Rameau does say in 1722 that E major is about grandeur and magnificence, tender and gay songs. Well, that kind of fits a little bit, but that's in France, not in Germany. I think maybe they were having a few problems in 1713 with E major. So Gemma very kindly is going to play for us the Allegro and the Siciliana from the Sonata in A major, now transposed for recorder in F major. So whenever you're ready, Gemma, thank you very much for your patience listening to me going on. say how incredibly beautiful that was. What a start. For those who don't know, Gemma's 14 years old. My goodness me, Gemma, what a gorgeous player. And how lovely. You've been very well taught as well. Wowzers, you've got some talent on you, girl. That's fantastic. I just wanted to say, to just reassure you, you're doing a fantastic job. Wowzers, really love it. Oh, I can't wait for the Siciliana now. No pressure, by the way. Oh, Gemma, thank you so much. Such musical, expressive playing. We can start with that. I will really, really lovely. Aren't we lucky to hear all this gorgeous music? Are we lucky that we can all meet? I'm just so humbled that you let me loose talking about all this stuff. It's fantastic to hear such talent, and I know Hannah, who comes after you, is also amazing, and Anna was just such a gorgeous play on that partita. How lucky. I feel very, very lucky that you chose to play today. Now, just very quickly, I would like to do a bit of work on a Siciliano because it's such a wonderful piece of canonic writing. I've got my keyboard here ready, by the way, and I'll do my best to explain. Fingers crossed. I always say that the first few, you did the phrasing really, really beautiful. And I came up with this set of words. Actually, I taught, and I intend to go back to Slovenia for many, many, many years. And one of the things I love doing there, apart from it's a gorgeous country with wonderful people, really warm, gorgeous, talented people, but wonderful wine and ice cream. So, how does this fit into this? Well, the phrasing of the first, which you did really well. I like ice cream. I like ice cream. And you know, that kind of stuck. We had a good laugh about it in the course, and that stuck with me. And now every time I hear it, that's what I think. And one of the things that's really important, and that you already did so brilliantly, is the intention, and it is phrasing and direction. And the idea that one should really do two of the same notes the same, or repeated notes the same, that there's always an intention. And for instance, we can think of it in rhetorical terms as gradatio, gradation, so that you think, I like something, I like something, I really like something. And in this case, I thought it would be quite fun. I don't know if you're like me. I like ice cream, and it can be anything in your own language, wherever you are in the world. So this idea of the repeated note going somewhere, which is exactly what you did, and I was really, really happy to hear that. Yeah, I don't know who teaches you, but it was really, really nice. You've been done very nicely. tendency can be to run on this piece. Okay, so you always have, I'm sure you've been told this. I can see a little nod there and a smile. Do you know what? You're in good company. I used to as well. So don't you worry. So it's a really good, and also because you're playing with that accompaniment as well. You've got this terrific rhythmic impulse. Bum, bum, bum. And to me, it seems that everything goes towards the second bar and then away from it. And then you've got an ornamented version of the same. And this piece to me feels like it's got quite a lot of sense of humour. Have you heard, I'm sure you have, the accompaniment of this?
Yes, I have.
Isn't it fun?
It is.
It's really fun. Both the fast movements have got really fun and snazzy, and you know, sense of humour I'm sure you would have had. Such a joyous piece. I can only think he really would have liked the flautist, perhaps not. If you wrote it in E major, because to make this sound effortless and light and joyous in E major takes quite some skill. But I like thinking that people are nice, and you know that Bach was kind to the flautist. So there's this wonderful counterpoint and off the beat connection between. This is it's in modern pitch. So I like ice cream. And so on. So there's quite a few bars where the accompaniment is missing the first beat, isn't it? But you've got such wonderful fun interplay. So you need to keep it going and buoyant without rushing, because the fun is really on the interplay, is on the dialogue between the two parts. And for instance, on the second half, talk about gradation and gradatio and the repeated line with sort of the second time perhaps being more important or sort of more insistent. The second half moves, whatever he gives in one, he takes away in the other. So this wonderful ebb and flow that, Gemma, I already started hearing at 14. That's not bad going, kid. That's really, really wonderful. There's lots of things to explore when it comes to tone. Colours, alternative fingering, so you are always in control of the ends of the phrases. You also have to think about support of the sound, so that, you know, especially when we're nervous, you know, the first thing that goes is our breath. We all know this, that playing wind instruments or singers, you know, indeed, you know, that's the first thing that wobbles. So to maintain a strong core, and for all of you that had just before we started the session, I actually had everyone doing exercises and relaxing and breathing to help things along, because, you know, I'm very aware of how scary it must be, but how awed I am that you are doing this, and so beautifully, Gemma. So just watch out to the ends of notes as well, okay? Because the music, although it stops, for instance, at the end, you know, when you come to a final resolution and a final cadence, there is still a point that holds the music, and that is the silence. Yeah, and that's really important. Silence is extremely important in music. So I would think about, and I have no doubt you'll do this marvelously, think about shapes and beginnings and endings of notes. You've got a really fantastic way ahead of you, I can hear, which is lovely. So there's lots to learn and lots to consider, but you are already doing fantastic things. Now, the Siciliano is just quite glorious, and for those who play it know that there's this wonderful canonic composition. And this I'm showing you, I should really be showing you, let's see if I've got all the versions here. I will show it to you in E minor so you can see how the two parts collaborate between first. Forget the right hand realization. Can you see? Pum, ti, ta, dum, pum, pum, pa. Mirrored perfectly. And most of the piece is a wonderful conversation between the top part and the bass part. I have done this many moons ago, just as part of a concert just with cello. Or you can do it, Tati.
I just wish we had a way with no latency between our computers that I could play bass line.
To hear your gorgeous playing, Tati, and I missed that.
It's crazy. I'm still sitting here feeling, you know, a little bit impotent without a cello.
I know. It is hard. It is hard. But we have the joy of this glorious piece of music. Really lovely. Now, with the Siciliano, the trick is to keep all the information within the bar without making too many accents, but also without letting it get too fast. Okay, because then you really lose. Dum ti da dum, dum ti da da. Okay, there's such a wonderful ebb and flow in the music all the time, and you know that perhaps those staccato marks weren't intended to be quite as short as that. But there is a way of doing them that also implies intention. Yeah, pum, pum, ti, because you're growing towards the second bar, aren't you? Yeah, and I think maybe we can start with. I'm very fond. I'm fond of all Bach, obviously. I just think this one is so special. It's quite unique as well, I think. So if you can find a way of keeping it flowing and controlling the sound as well, that would be really good, because then you've got, and it's much easier to play obviously when you've got the accompaniment, because you've got and so on. Isn't it gorgeous? The structure between the two, the communication between the two, it really one feeds from one another, and also consider phrases, because where there's the first phrase, and this is not a trick question, by the way. It's a really important thing, because it seems to keep moving. It seems to be ever changing. Tum ta ti dum, tum tum ti ta dum, ti ta di da di da di da di dum tum. Does it ever really rest?
No, it's like carrying on.
That's it. Absolutely does. And that's the sense of perpetual movement. which can be really tricky, especially if you play it slower, isn't it? It's a lot harder. Also, you're very exposed without an accompaniment, you know. Can we just have a little go? Because already you're doing such amazing things. I want you to breathe into your tummy a little bit, okay? Because I know it's hard. And try and keep your throat open so you really support the sound. So we've got 5 minutes left. If I can just help you along a little bit in what I think is a good way of looking at it. Others will have other opinions, but I think why not? Why not do that? I think it's wonderful, varied world out there. Okay. Lovely. Oh my goodness, you really have taken on board what I've said, but not just taken it on board, but done it. Thank you. Thank you so much. And that is just really, really amazing. That's great. And it just felt calmer. Do you see what I mean? It just felt that moved in a different way. I know there's technical issues when it comes to that wretched thumb job. I know. Who likes that? I don't think anyone likes that. And it's just so, I always like thinking that your thumb has to be quicker than your fingers, the other fingers, when it comes to those jumps. It's a bit ingrained. Not only do you get that, but you also get C sharp after that. Hello. It's got such lovely colour. I find that the C sharp is quite a nasal note. And there's a whole art on using your cavities and your body as a resonance box to get the right resonance of notes. It's a real combination of air pressure where your thumb is and where you feel the notes living in your face, in your head. And of course, you need to know at what point you're accompanying and what point you are melody, because if you look, and this is probably similar to the copy you've got, when you've got here, you've got this lovely melismatic bit of melody and a bit of accompaniment there to allow the bass to come through. Do you see what I mean? It's a really wonderful piece of writing and communicating. Really through the music. And again, just look at what he's doing with the articulation, because the articulation and what's actually written, if it's indeed Bach, is really telling. And I'm talking about the last 2 bars of the first half. So isn't that interesting? He's got a little blue note, a little naughty note there, doesn't he? And it finishes in major. That's where it finally rests. So it's taken all of those bars off backwards and forwards, and I think this really rather suits the Siciliano. You know, this sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, one in a bar, one that gets passed from instrument to instrument. And then if you find a really lovely cellist, I'm very lucky because I've got the wonderful Tati, which is just such a gorgeous player to do these lovely things with, and a really lovely keyboard player. That would be fantastic. I have no doubt you'll do great things, Gemma, and I'll be hearing of you in the future. You are gorgeous. Thank you so much. And I hope it helped.
It did, yes.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much. We're now coming on to our final player, Hannah. We'll probably overrun 5 or 10 minutes in the session. If you do have to leave, the session will be available afterwards on YouTube. So please do go and find us there. If you subscribe, you don't get bombarded with emails or anything. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps us. So find our YouTube channel, which has the blue plaque. I'll try and put a link up if I can in the chat. Also, do go to our website and join the mailing list, because then we can keep you in touch when we put films up. Again, we're very good about not emailing too frequently, because we know how everyone's email boxes are groaning under the weight of too much mail. But that's an easy way to stay in touch. Thank you for listening so far, and thank you to Gemma and Anna for the stunning performances so far. And I'm really delighted to introduce Hannah, who's joining us from Austria.
Hello, Hannah. Now,
Hello.
Hannah comes from Austria. She is 16.
Yeah, I'm 16 years old.
Fantastic. And playing Traverso, which is so amazing. And I know you've done, was it a year and a bit with Traverso, is that right?
Yeah, a year and 5 months. But I haven't seen my teacher in 5 months because of the current situation in Austria.
Of course you have. And I happen to know who Hannah's teacher is, and she's a very, very dear player to me that I met when she was not much older than you, Hannah. And Alexandra Skrilek, who is a fantastic Slovenian flute player who also plays Baroque flute and other instruments. And I remember hearing Alexandra a few years back and thinking, my goodness, what talent. And sure enough, look how brilliantly, hello, Alexandra. It's just so lovely to see your student now. I'm very honoured that you sent Hannah to us. And again, I will mention Slovenia because I have such a lovely relationship with the country and Croatia and all the countries around there. And I've seen such incredible talent and will. It's been just amazing. So I'm really thrilled that you're here, Hannah. Brilliant. Now, you're playing the first movement of the G minor, so BWV 1020, or is it? This is the new... You choose wisely, because this, I'm really glad we have such a great snapshot of the 3 periods of Bach. Well, composing and perhaps this, I don't know. I mean, this sonata is supposed to have been, well, hang on, I've got, yeah, okay, 1734 with a question mark. Now then, there are questions about the authorship of this. Some people think it's C.P. Bach, and in fact give it a catalogue number for C.P. Bach, and as a violin sonata. And I don't know, some of you may know, some of you may not know, that this is also in a version of a violin sonata of the time, and it's H542.5. Okay, and this is when C.P. Bach would have been about 19 or 20 years old. This has been recorded. In some recordings, they attribute it straight away to C.P. Bach, and it's been recorded both as a violin sonata and as a flute sonata. Now, Ambrose says in her article that apparent similarities between the E flat major and the G minor sonatas suggest that these 2 compositions can be considered together. In 1860, Wilhelm Rust summed up the thinking at the time, because the thinking behind how one attributes this has been going on for a while. And in 1860, Rust said, he wrote that the authenticity of the G minor sonata was accepted by some and doubted by others. He pointed out that one cannot doubt the authenticity of the E flat major because of the attribution to J.S. Bach by C.P.E. Bach. Now that's really, really interesting. And that if one accepts the attribution that then the G minor must also be J.S. Bach. I mean, this is a bit skewed thinking, but it's a way of resolving the problem. It doesn't mean that's the right one, but it's one way of solving it and shelving it. I think I don't think people really like having issues with attribution. I think creates problems, but I think problems are possibilities and things that can be discovered. And I think that's why not. I'm certainly not going to tell you one way or the other. Personally, I think my personal feeling is that this is C.P. Bach, by the way, because of the language. I've played a lot of C.P. Bach. But again, I'm not a scholar on C.P. Bach, and I wouldn't dare do that. That's my personal feeling. This is where it stays. But this is what I think. Now, there are attempts to liken movements of the sonatas to other works of James Bach to make sure that, you know, it would be linked, so to give it veracity, and suggestions that one should expand our conception of the elder Bach's range of styles. Well, yes, okay, I understand that, and I think that's an important thing, because we do know that Bach, like I said earlier, was a magpie. But I just, if this was composed in 1734, is incredibly forward sounding and gallant. Is a very different language from the other music he was composing at the time. C.P. Bach, on the other hand, was going towards enlightenment. He was of a different generation, okay? And so he composed things in different ways. But what is interesting is that the E flat major was performed in those Leipzig concerts. Okay, so if they are both kind of linked together and the dates kind of match, then we have issues. Is it father? Is it son? Do you know what? I think it's a beautiful piece of music. Whatever it is, I don't care. In a way, play it, enjoy it, do the best you can to do it justice, you know, with all your heart, because it is such a beautiful piece. And I've lived with it for such a long time. But what is really interesting as well is that a score from about 1760 of the G minor sonata, once owned by Brahms, gives clues for the later attribution of the sonata to C.P. Bach and for its subsequent publication as a violin sonata. The title reads G-moll sonata, cembalo obbligato, no, oblitato actually, I'm sure is the typo. This is oblitato con violino del Signore Seti. So this was found in the library of Brahms, of all people. Isn't that amazing? How about that for cool fact? I like cool fact. I live for stuff like that. And Alfred Durr, who's the person who did a lot of looking into this sonatas and thinking about it, says characteristics of style indicate the next generation all too clearly. Continuous rhythmic basis, courtly sentimentality, galant style really, melodies based on triad and short phrases. You know, who knows? I just love it. I'm really glad you're playing it. And on traverso, fantastic. Now, of the key, again, I'm going to, Matheson is a wonderful theoreticist and composer for really worthy of study. And that would be a whole series of masterclass because he's a really interesting character. He wrote of G minor in 1713. The G minor is almost the most beautiful key because it not only combines the rather serious quality of the previous key, which is D minor, if we're looking at cycle of fifths, or the previous key with one flat rather than two, this with spirited loveliness, but also brings in an uncommon grace and kindness. Isn't that lovely? Who doesn't like? I think we all need a bit of grace and kindness, really. Therefore, it is fitting for tender as well as for refreshing things, for longing as well as for happy ones. And I leave you with that thought, and please, I cannot wait to hear you play. Amazing. I wished I'd played the traverso like that at 16. We're lucky to hear all this amazing talent. My goodness, Hannah, thank you so much. So much goodness. I know you've got a terrific teacher. I know she's a fabulous player. And isn't that wonderful that the world is changing so much? That we are now finding younger players already knowing about historical performance. Because it's not about one or the other, you know. It's about everything being together and having a good understanding of things. It's not one better than the other. The modern flute is not worse than the Baroque flute. It's just they belong to different times, to different sound worlds. And I'm just thrilled, really thrilled to hear you. There's a few things, as we know, with technique that will come, that just comes with time. The Baroque flute is quite an great instrument to play, isn't it? We know that. If you go from the modern flutes embouchure to the Baroque flute embouchure, suddenly it's like, how does this even work? How is it possible? I think it's amazing that you can already play in G minor, you know, doing a switch like that because of all the cross fingers. And, you know, I'm very fond of G minor. I think G minor's got wonderful color. It's a really special key, isn't it? This piece is really, really beautiful. Now, talking about violinistic language, if we look at Bach 29, how about that? And that to me feels very much like C.P. Bach. I have to say, if you look at his flute concertos, for instance, you do get lots of leaps, don't you? There's a lot of things. It just, I'm not going to kind of say anything for sure because I'm a bit scared of doing that, but it just seems so much more like that. Now, when it comes to the sudden change of, which I now understand is what terraced dynamics, it's really appropriate for C.P. Bach but as well as all composers, really. You can do all kinds of things. If we talk about C.P. Bach, if you think about, for instance, I know I'm talking about C.P. Bach, this is not being about Bach, but if you look at the A minor sonata, talk about extremes. Do you know what I mean? And you do get this offbeat, this slurs that off center. There's a lot to be said about great change there. Now, when it comes to the opening series, I don't know if some of you know this. There's wonderful obbligato part on the harpsichord, which is all arpeggiato. It's a beautiful opening, isn't it? And so if you look at the sonatas of Bach, for instance, the B minor, where really I believe that the B minor obbligato sonata is more of a harpsichord piece with flute accompaniments than the other way around, where you have continuous, pretty much, you've got a few places where the harpsichord accompanies. Here is clearly defined, isn't it? There's a few points of dialogue but very much the harpsichord or the forte piano. Did I say that? Oh, out loud. Very naughty. I'm being very naughty. But it just feels so forward looking, you know, that it really hands you over. You know, there's none of the thematic material. Whereas in something like the B minor, for instance, that we know is Bach has, for instance, or even the A major. But here you've got such a clear cut, and forgive me for my terrible keyboard skills. Anyway, you don't get any of the thematic material, do you?
No.
At all. And then you come to the end of the phrase. Out of nowhere comes this divine melody, heartbreaking. And I think it's such a wonderful surprise to hear it, isn't it? This lovely leap, ta-da, off the beat. Ooh, we like that. And you also have a melody that over 1, 2, 3, 4 bars that we could divide into 3 different emotions. Okay, because they are different colors. This piece is full of what I like calling blue notes. Do you know what they are? They're just slightly off, sort of jazziness. I call them jazzy notes, blue notes, but they are notes that really don't belong necessarily to the key, but make it really interesting and also hard to play in a traverso, huh?
Yeah, it's really hard. I only played the sonata on the modern flute, and there we have like lots of keys and it's easier, and I have lots of respect of the traverso actually, but I love it so much and it helps me understanding a lot.
It does, Angel, and I think it's amazing that you think like that. Look, good music is good music. This piece can be played on anything, and just, you know, it is just such a wonderful thing. But I think whatever you do, going to the original, going to what might be the son of what the instrument possibilities really then could help further possibilities in other instruments, for instance. But you've got, hang on, let me just see. Can you hear it? The first opening, ta da da da, pa da da da, and I would pay real close attention to the articulation, you know, because articulation is such an important part of music, speech of music. Now, if we talk about Supi Bach, and please do, everyone, go and check out his. I've got this is a fantastic book for all players because it's a really good. I think, and I again, in the sort of list of treatises that I like for this, I will tell you that I've got here as 3 important treatises of the time. On playing the flute, obviously, for obvious reasons. And then Bach.
Lisette, I'll put a list of these up in the chat now, actually.
Brilliant. And then, and this is a little bit perhaps contentious. Are you ready? Deep breath. Leopold Mozart. We will have a list of this. I think if you look at the time that they were published, once in 1752, C.P. Bach's book, first part 1753 and 1762, the second part. And then, dare I say, the treatise on the fundamental principles of violin playing by Leopold Mozart, 1756. Look, they're quite close. They were of the time. And whenever you write something, the assumption is you're writing about what you know, what's going around you. So I think it's really interesting to look at bowing technique, about how they would bow things. That is true for all of it. That if you look at vocal methods, if you go to keyboard for ornaments, for all kinds of things, it gives you a really good idea of what was around. I think sometimes the most telling things for your own instrument are not the writings for your instrument, you know. How's that? I've got a really strong sense that perhaps you look at lots of different things at the time. And what I mean by that is that, for instance, the implication that a slur over two notes would be a diminuendo. So when you've got, and that's a really special affect or effect to provoke an affect, which is all this music is about. But to be able to do it in time is really important. So you create this series of little nuances. So this is the essence of a lot of Baroque music, is it not? Small gestures within the bigger gesture. And this is such a good example of that, Hannah. And the other thing is, what do you do with the first two notes? Where's the emphasis? Where does it go? Because you can do this many different ways, you know. Because also, do you have the first beat?
No, there's a break.
Exactly. But is there? Is it implied? You see what I mean? The questions about this are amazing. So, could it be? Or so you make the jump ta ti da ti di di tam ta da ba da da bum ba. The important thing is there's a little pattern, isn't it, with our beats. Ta da ba da bum ba. And what happens the second phrasing, and there's a little unwritten rule of any good composer doesn't do anything more than twice, and third time he changes it, doesn't he? The second phrase, I know, interesting, and he takes on a different character. So it's so movable, it's so jazzy, it's so wonderfully flexible. I wanted to have a little bit more fun with it. You know, dee dee dum ba da 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 dee da 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 dee da da bum, dee dee dum ba da dee da dum dee dee da dum ba da da ba. And then does it do it a third time? Ba da. That's very vocal, isn't it? And I would like you to think about opening up the head, because it's a little bit closed, and I know it's nerves, I know it's, you know, there's some wonderful exercises, and I'm sure Alexandra will know all of them, and she's already doing them with you because she's such a beautiful teacher and player. Just of opening up, working with vowels. Vowel sounds and change. Yes. I saw that face, you know.
It's such a shame because I think that the audience can't always, we can't register the players' faces because the camera says, unless they talk, we don't have the camera. But just for the record, Hannah was doing the most amazing, she threw back her head and gales of laughter at that point and the mention of vowels.
Yeah, and vowels. And I think for some of you that have lessons with me, you will know all about that. I apologize, but I don't. And I think long notes and really finding the resonance of those beautiful high notes are really, really important. Now, it's really important, this piece, knowing when you are accompaniment and knowing when you're melody and what to do with the melody. And I really wanted to start thinking as you go through your development and playing, when it comes to the phrasing, about the articulation, about the direction, about the dynamics and the nuances, all these little things that the traverso is so fabulous at doing. On the recording, we really have to work very hard. Well, we have to work hard anyway to sound effortless. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into effortlessness. But all the different endings, you know, all this little thing, this music lives off that, this galant style. You see how much detail there is? Yeah, and it is all of that without losing timing and as part of a whole. And then when it comes to bar 29, to just keep things nice, and because it's accompaniment, isn't it? And you also then have self-accompanied melody. So there's an awful lot of detail with lots of cover notes. You're doing a fabulous job. Really amazing. So I just want you to think about the phrasing, because to me it seems that it's coming down, you know, in the beginning. What a gorgeous note, that F natural. And we know on the traverso quite a tricky note it is as well. Just give it a go. Good, well done. Now I would like you to start from a calmer point. There's a lot of movement, and I understand what you want to do, but sometimes the intention stays in the movement rather than on the flute, you know. And so if you can almost hear the accompaniment, because again I will say this, the music has already started. In this case it has. It really has. So you have to pick up the wonderful atmosphere that a keyboard player has given you. So if you do too much, then the beginning may get a bit confused. That's really the basis. We can even take more notes. Could you play just the main melody? Good girl, well done. That's really good. And now if you do that again and see what you can do to bring out the colour in that F natural, okay? Because you've got... So almost you've got to kind of go in and then broaden with your lips, you know, to get that colour on the F natural. You can try da 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 da. Well done. So immediately I started to hear the F is much softer. But soft is colour too. It's got softer edges, huh? Isn't it gorgeous? Ta-da! It's, to me, this is starting. I like likening things to vocal, but it starts to sound to me like a vocal thing. So you've got 3 lines. That is going to be repeated a lot of the time. We're out of time, but let me just tell you that all is considered on the accompaniment, on the short notes, direction. that all the short notes shouldn't perhaps be done the same way as short. Maybe that you can do different things depending on what the bass line is doing. Ba, ba, bum, ba, dum. Da, da, dee, da, da, dum, bum, ba. And here feels really orchestral to me. Dee, dee, da, ba, da, dum, ba, da, da. Isn't that such a jubilant moment? You really feel it when you play, huh? Dee, 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 ba, da, dum, ba, da, da. Dee, 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 bum, 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 bum. Talk about change of character all the time. This is very characteristic of C.P. Bach. Sorry. Of his language. Anyway, we're out of time. Anna, what fantastic play. And thank you, Alexandra, for sending us. Anna.
Well, I should love all the panelists to turn their cameras on now, because I'd like to thank you all for playing. It's a rapid, short, sharp immersion into just a real taster of Lisette's wonderful teaching. I, sitting here, feel a great honour to actually share in your teaching and learn so much. I mean, it's amazing to hear you talk about Bach, any composer actually, and I do urge you all to come and hear Lisette on the 13th of March talk about French repertoire. There's also an opportunity on the 6th of March to hear our first violinist Rachel Harris working on solo violin repertoire, which of course has relevance for all players. Doesn't just have to be violinists. So please do click on the links for those and join them.
I can't recommend. Rachel for me is one of the best players I've ever played with.
I think in the band we're spoiled for choice with our treble players.
We are. We all. I mean, I think you're all amazing, and I think I just can't wait. I've already signed up to listen to her.
I saw. But before we go, we've got questions actually. So I've just wanted to mention a couple of things. I wanted to make sure I thanked you, Anna, Gemma, and Hannah. I saw that in the chat somebody put up a thank you, the link if you want to find us on YouTube. There's also find us on Spotify, because you can actually hear Lisette's wonderful playing via some of our recordings on Spotify. And I can add, if you want to be added to the mailing list to find out more about masterclasses, I know not everybody always does Facebook or things like that. Email me again. I need permission to put you on there. I've got all your email addresses, but of course I won't add you until you actually say you'd like to be added, because of all the data protection in the UK now. But we're now going to open up the forum for questions, and please do add questions in the chat, but I've got a couple I need to put to Lisette first. I'm probably going to save a big one till last actually. By the way, Lisette, I don't know if you can see, I don't know how you managed to teach and read the chat. It must be very distracting, but there's lots of lovely comments coming in for you. But there's a question from Julie. Can you say a bit more about vowel work? So that's one question to come to, and then there's a big one at the end from Bruce Martin about playing Bach without having a strict idea about how it should be played. That's a big question, which I can read out in full perhaps at the end.
It's a brilliant.
So whilst we're waiting for questions to come in from our huge audience actually, in fact we had too many people for the session, so I shall email everyone who had trouble joining up and give them the link on YouTube. Yes, perhaps Julie's question about vowel work.
It's really, really important when you thank you, Ben. That's really kind. Ben is one of the lovely students that's doing a lot of vowel work at the moment. I think with woodwind, one thing that we really have to consider is that our body is our resonance box, and that's to think of ourselves as singers through an instrument, always anyway, whether it's a violin or it's a keyboard. But it's very, very true for us as woodwind players, because we have to breathe. And to change the vowel sounds inside our mouth is really, really important, because it really changes a world of colours for different ranges, for different possibilities on the instrument. There are some wonderful sort of exercises you can do. I would urge you to sing first, so you understand the position inside your mouth of where the vowels, or where the glot is, the lower part of your tongue. When you yawn, that is down, or is it up? Because if it's up, when you say g g g, you can feel the back of the tongue going up. But if you yawn, and if you relax, so within that you've got you've got such an amazing array of colours that you can really that you really can do on the flute, and you can really hear it as well. Just imagine the possibilities, the shades of grey, the immense shades of grey on that. I think there is a tendency with a lot of sort of some flute playing of going very dark and aggressive. On the ooh sort of sounds, but you can also say ah, e, or, you know, all of this creates such flexibility, and to have an array of those. And there's so many exercises with slurred notes, open notes, and that you can really try out what do your lips need to do, what does your jaw need to do, where you feel the note resonating, where is it going. I mean, it's a huge thing. This is a masterclass on technique alone, just on sound production. And for those who know me, I am sorry, but we did a lot of this.
I've got another question actually for you, Lisette, from Carmen. Which traverso would you recommend starting with? She plays classical and Irish flute, but doesn't know where to begin with Baroque.
Oh, do you know, it depends on your budget, you know, and I think, for instance, there are some really lovely resin flutes. Vincent Bernolin, for instance, makes them. It is always worth having a good instrument, and an instrument that is an all-rounder. You can have a Rothenburg, for instance. You can have a Dunne, Palanca even, depending, because you're going to have to adjust to an instrument that is essentially out of tune within itself, and also to the size of the blowhole here. So that is going to be a huge adjustment. So I would look, really depending on budget, but Vincent Bernolin has got some really lovely instruments that are made and designed by him out of a particular resin that he has developed and patented, I believe, and that would be a really good starting point. Perhaps not so much the aloes plastic flutes, because things have moved on since then, but you know, go for a good maker, or if buying a second-hand flute, take a player with you so you can check it out for you, the state of it, and the tenons and so on. And so yeah, I hope this helps.
Lisette, do you mind just typing into the chat? One of our attendees has asked, could you just write that name down, please? And I'm afraid I don't know how to spell it. And whilst you do that, I've got a question. If you can multitask, I know you can, from John.
Yes, that's
so you're writing down. Oh no, Ben's already added that. That's perfect. Thank you, Ben. Ben has been brilliantly adding in resources quicker than I can think to get my fingers tight. So John's question is, what is a good resource for sensitive and regular fingerings to apply to playing these sonatas?
Oh, that is such a good question. Do you mean fingerings for the Baroque flute or finger work?
Well, we'll wait and see, because that question came through the Q&A, so I'll need John to add to that question again. Hang on a second. Well, I'll see if he comes in.
Exercises you can do that I use, and I'm a magpie, and I collect treatises, vocal, other instruments, and modern flute and contemporary music is fabulous to explore sound possibilities and finger works, slow, you know, move your, you know, it. Gosh, this is a whole.
John's saying for the Baroque flute specifically, actually.
Yeah. Well, I don't have. I never work with things specifically for the Baroque flute. I draw inspiration from the treatises, but I really look at a lot of other methods, and in the modern flute, for instance, scale patterns work. There is a wonderful vocal method by Marchesi that has vocalese, works that are really useful for vowel sounds and also for finger work with patterns. The important thing is to understand how your fingers work, to have the first thing before you start even picking up the flute, how you hold yourself, how you hold the flute, because that's going to have a huge influence in how you move your fingers. because as we know on the Baroque flute, the stretch can be horrendous until you get used to it and painful. So it's really important you go carefully and move slowly. Do 2 notes. Work, for instance, trill work that I find really helpful. When you work in opposites with your finger work, as the fingers come up, imagine they go down, and when they go down, imagine they go up. So you get the spring-like quality out of your fingers in a very relaxed way. You go through all the fingerings like that. And then you can start playing in patterns. Really paying attention to how it feels to move the finger. Okay? And then and so on and so forth. And you transpose this. There's lots of patterns I use. Anna will know all about this because mostly every lesson we do, she's laughing. It is true, but very good for you. So anything that helps you understand how your fingers, how it feels to play in a relaxed way. The less is more. The less they do, the better you can control them. And I hope that makes sense and it helps.
I'm wondering if there are. I had a hand raised, but it seems to have disappeared again. I think it was Naomi somewhere. I'm just check the Q&A. Okay, I've got one more question in the Q&A. I will have to wrap up. I'm just checking the time here.
Yeah.
We probably ought to wrap up in a couple of minutes. I know we could sit here for hours. Please do keep checking our website and Facebook, all those kind of sites, because we will be. We've run these masterclasses for free because we've had funding from the Arts Council of England. We are going to carry on the series. We've decided. So if you've enjoyed it and want to contribute in any tiny way, you know, a cup of coffee or something, you can do that via our website. We will find a way to continue these masterclasses anyway. But I do keep checking back. Meanwhile, Raoul has a question. Could you give us some tips about playing faster in recorder for Bach's Allegros and Baroque music? As a thank you from Julie, and we must come to the big complex question from Bruce. So I think I'll say now we'll take Raoul's question and then go straight to the question from Bruce, which I'll read out after. Is that okay, Lisette?
Yes, of course, Raoul. It's a question that has lots of different types of answers because we have to talk about articulation and fingering separately and together. Articulation is something that comes from understanding how your mouth works, where your tongue position is, and what you want to do, and what kind of articulation you want to do. When it comes to Baroque particular articulations, you've got a lot of tada, tada, dada, tada, da, tada, da, dada, tada, diddle. You know, there's so many. Again, it's a myriad, and it also depends on where you are from. I'm Portuguese, so I tend to prefer the articulations that are more on the front. I struggle more with diddle and dugga and tucka because they are not from my mother tongue. And so, although I've been in England for a while, English is my second language. And so I just kind of work in funny ways like that. That's one thing. So you need to develop speed on that. And actually, articulation is not something necessarily that you have to have a recorder or an instrument for. You can do it. I used to do it going down the street to just train the muscle and doing it in patterns. And then finger work wise, again, is the same as I just said before. That is really important to understand, to have one good balance on the instrument. Without balance, without good posture, you can't move your fingers properly. Then it's understanding how they move in relation to each other. Patterns, scales, I'm afraid, are really, really important. And then give yourself, make yourself some exercises from the pieces you want to improve. Take out the passages that you find hard and find out what it is about the finger movement itself that you find tricky, and make your own exercises around them. But I think just scales and patterns will be very good for that. Any articulation as well. It's just an evolving thing. And good luck.
Okay, Lisa, that's wonderful. And you can always email us via trust@brookstreetband.co.uk email address, and I will forward emails on to Lisette. There's some lovely comments in the chat, Lisette. I hope you can see them all. There's a question from Bruce Martin. Could you please ask Lisette what she thinks about playing Bach without having a strict idea about how it should be played? Instead, allowing spontaneous phrasing, articulation and dynamics so that the emotion and direction the music is taking the player in at the moment of performance is communicated to the audience rather than hearing a prepared script or speech read by an actor.
Oh, that is such a brilliant question. Thank you so much. I think, yes, absolutely. And I think for anyone who loves performing, anyone who loves playing, it's the most amazing feeling to lose yourself in a piece of music. I don't think you prepare, or you shouldn't. What I mean is, there are two things. One is rehearsal and prepare and understanding and studying a piece, and the other one is performing. In the performance, lots of things, lots of magic. This is where the magic works. And I would say two things. In the first instance, almost the preparedness has to take a back seat to exactly what you said, to the moment, to what you want from the piece and how you communicate, because that's really the most important point. In fact, the most important part about performing, what is performance if not communication, if not storytelling? This is the most important element of any performance. Give me a performance full of mistakes, well, within reason, but give me a performer that communicates and emotes, and I'm good. You know? On the other hand, we have an idea and a thought that like this: we are always going to be influenced by all the things that are around us, that surround us. Even if you never listen to any Bach and you've listened to hip hop and rap, you're going to be influenced by it. So your performance is always going to be informed by something. And as a historical performance and an historical performer and researcher, I find it immensely useful to go and have a look how things were, to have a look at instruments, to have a look at music. But I would say that ultimately the choices are mine as a performer. Don't you think, Tati? That you make your own choices and make what is true to you. Different people have different personalities and different way of communicating.
I think what's interesting is it can change. I mean, you as you say, you do the research, you do the practice, you are prepared, you've thought through lots of different options. And something I've noticed, particularly about us as a group, we've been through phases when we've rehearsed. We rehearse intensely. But then we might, on a concert day, not rehearse the repertoire we're actually going to perform that day. We play together, so we're in tune with each other's thoughts, feelings, and we're actually, physically in tune. The instruments, the violins, the flute, the recorder, it's all that the intonation is good. And then the performance is totally free. And actually, we walk on stage and we don't know what will happen.
That's right.
And it is a conversation, actually. It is storytelling, and it's very thrilling to be part of. And I love, but we can't do that without having done the preparation first. So you do need to have, had the preparation, but it's very liberating.
Yeah, it is, but it's not a script. And I understand exactly what you meant. And it's a very good question, a very important question, actually. And it's a question of the most profound quality. So I'm really grateful for you to have asked that. Who wants to hear something scripted that sounds stale and boring? No one.
No.
Really, because we are not like that. And as human beings, we want connection, we want spontaneity, we want in the moment. And that's one of the things that's been so difficult at a time like this. Because I've really missed Tati and Kelly and Rachel and Catherine. There is something really special, the bond you create when you really gel, when you're kindred spirits, where you don't need to look at somebody to know exactly. You need to feel the sense of them and their essence coming through and to respond to that. And that's at a soul level. And that's really, really important.
And that, as you say, Lisette, has been denied to us this year. We've got together 3 times in the past 12 months, which we are grateful for. Hopefully things will ease. But do you know what? Having this online community, meeting all of these wonderful students, young players, students from all over the world, and these comments coming through from the attendees, it's just it's wonderfully life affirming actually, because music has found a way of continuing. Who'd have thought us 18th century people
would be doing this?
Andelians, a Ramovian perhaps in your case, or Bach, how that we would have to exist through the medium of a computer. But we found a way of doing it, and actually it's brought us to all of you, and we're tremendously grateful for that.
Humbled by how many of you have wanted to be part of this.
Yes, and it's going to take a long time to digest these lovely comments coming through from the chat. I shall make sure we keep a transcript of the chat. But I think for now I probably ought to thank once again, well, firstly, Lisete, because what a way to spend Saturday afternoon, wherever you are in the world. This is just a pleasure. And I also want to thank Lisette's husband for enabling her to do this by taking her 2 young children out of the house, because
arrived from the beach. Yes.
Okay, so there's huge thanks behind the scenes, but also to thank Anna, Gemma, and Hannah for your absolutely beautiful playing, and for being brave and standing up in front of your computer in your own home to do this. That's such a difficult thing to do. It's one thing to psych yourself up in a room or on a stage with a teacher opposite you, but just at home on a computer, it's really tough. And to all 3 of you have played so beautifully. Thank you. Please do sign up for further masterclasses, and as I say, we don't yet know all the dates. We've got 1 more published with Lisete. There will be more, so mailing list, you'll find us on the web or YouTube or any of those places, and you can just email us and we'll be in touch. So thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye for now.